The hand that built a cake empire was crushed in a machine. It happened in the basement of his own home, a horrifying moment that left Buddy Valastro, the cake boss, staring at his right hand, his artistic hand impaled by a bowling pin setter. As blood pooled, the family rushed to free him, not knowing if he would ever frost a cake again. This was the beginning of an unpredictable final chapter for a man who had built a reality television dynasty. And it all started with a dream and a tragedy in a small New Jersey bakery. Before we uncover what really happened, tell us in the comments, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding about this story? In the heart of Hoboken, New Jersey, on a corner that would one day bear his family's name, Buddy Valastro was born into flour and sugar. But the dream didn't start with him. It started with his father, Bartolo Buddy Valastro Sr., a Sicilian immigrant who in 1964 took over Carlo's bakery and turned it into a local institution. For young Buddy, the bakery wasn't just a business, it was his entire world. He grew up surrounded by the smell of buttercream and the warmth of the ovens, learning to pipe buttercream roses before he could properly write his own name. But the foundation of this story is tragedy. In 1994, when Buddy was just 17 years old, his father passed away from lung cancer. It was a devastating blow that reshaped everything. Buddy Sr. had been the heart of the bakery, and without him, the family business was on the brink of collapse. Buddy's mother, Mary, was left to run the shop with her children, but it was young Buddy who stepped into his father's shoes. He was just a teenager with a heavy burden and a name to live up to. But he had learned from the best. Every technique, every recipe, every trick of the trade had been passed down from father to son. And now, it was all on his shoulders. What happened next would turn a family tragedy into a television empire, but first, Buddy had to prove that he was worthy of his father's legacy, and that meant reimagining what a bakery could be. By 2004, Buddy Valastro had already proven he could fill his father's shoes. His wedding cakes were regularly featured in bridal magazines, and the business was thriving without a single camera in sight. But a phone call from the Food Network would change everything. They invited him to compete on the Food Network Challenge, and what Buddy discovered surprised even himself. He wasn't just a baker, he was born for television. The camera loved him. And he loved it right back. His natural charisma, his gift for one-liners, his ability to explain complex techniques while cracking jokes, it all came effortlessly. He competed in 4 Food Network challenges, and each appearance brought more attention to Carlo's bakery. But it was a call from TLC in 2008 that would launch him into the stratosphere. The network had a vague idea for a cake show, but Buddy had a much better one. He pitched them a vision, a 100-year-old bakery, a crazy Italian family, and cakes so ambitious they seemed impossible. They asked him to send a tape. He sent it the next day. They signed him immediately. If you're enjoying this story, subscribe so you never miss our next documentary. When Cake Boss premiered in April 2009, nobody could have predicted what happened next. The show became the #1 food program on cable, airing in over 220 territories worldwide and dubbed into 45 languages. Lines formed around the block at the Hoboken bakery. Tourists flew in from across the globe just to taste the cannoli. Buddy went from a local baker to an international celebrity almost overnight. For 10 straight years, he filmed 11 months out of the year, traveling to Abu Dhabi, Russia, Brazil, and beyond. His mother, Mary, became a fan favorite as the boss. His sisters and brothers-in-law became household names. And Buddy Valastro had achieved what his father had only dreamed of. Carlo's bakery was now a household name. But fame, as history has shown, comes with a price. And for Buddy, that price was just beginning to reveal itself. For a decade, Cake Boss dominated cable television. Buddy Valastro became synonymous with impossible cakes, a 6-tiered wedding cake for 1,000 guests in Las Vegas, a boxing glove for a funeral, a cake with a functioning water fountain. Each episode followed the same formula, a seemingly impossible deadline, a crisis in the kitchen, and Buddy's signature one-liner, "It's my life, and I love it." The formula worked brilliantly. Audiences couldn't get enough. But behind the sugar-coated success, the empire was expanding at a dizzying pace. By 2013, Buddy had opened Buddy V's Ristorante at the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas, followed by Pizza Cake at Harrah's, Buddy's Jersey Eats, and the Boss Cafe at the Link. Carlo's bakery grew from a single Hoboken storefront to 14 bakeries across multiple states. A 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility churned out 10,000 cakes a day. And then came the cake ATMs, high-tech refrigerated vending machines selling slices of cake in Las Vegas, Toronto, and beyond. The television cameras never stopped rolling. Between Cake Boss, Next Great Baker, and countless specials, Buddy filmed 11 months out of every year. The family dynamic that audiences loved was also framed behind the scenes. In 2010, his brother-in-law Remy Gonzalez was arrested for sexual assault of a minor and later sentenced to 9 years in prison. In 2014, Buddy himself was arrested for driving while intoxicated. The cracks were forming. The public saw a man living the dream. But the weight of the crown was beginning to show. And an empire built on family and buttercream was about to face its most difficult test yet. The cameras never stopped rolling. For 10 seasons, Buddy Valastro's life was an open book, broadcast into millions of homes across the globe. But the same family dynamics that made the show so compelling began to show their darker side. The pressure of constant filming, the grueling schedules, and the relentless expansion of the empire took a toll that even the most elaborate buttercream frosting couldn't hide. In 2010, a scandal rocked the family. Buddy's brother-in-law, Remy Gonzalez, who had become a familiar face on the show, was arrested for sexual assault of a minor. He was later sentenced to 9 years in prison. The Valastro family, known for their tight-knit unity, had to navigate a public nightmare while keeping the cameras rolling. It was a stark reminder that reality television doesn't always show reality. The family tensions that played out on screen were more than just entertaining drama. According to one reviewer, the show's behind-the-scenes environment could be described as a hostile work environment, with constant screaming and humiliating pranks directed at employees. In one episode, a baker was forced to dress in a grass skirt and coconut shell bra in front of customers. While these moments made for engaging television, they also revealed the cracks forming beneath the sugar-coated surface. In 2014, Buddy found himself on the wrong side of the law. He was arrested for driving while intoxicated in New York. According to reports, when police pulled him over, he allegedly told officers, "You can't arrest me. I'm the cake boss." He would later plead guilty, receiving a 90-day license suspension and a $300 fine. His public apology, while heartfelt, couldn't undo the image of a celebrity who believed his fame made him untouchable. If this story surprised you, share it with someone who would enjoy uncovering forgotten Hollywood stories. By 2017, the empire had grown to include 14 bakeries, a 100,000 square foot factory churning out 10,000 cakes a day, and countless television specials. But the very thing that made Buddy famous, his relentless drive, was slowly consuming him. He was filming 11 months out of the year, barely sleeping, and constantly expanding. And then came a tragedy that would make him question everything. His mother, Mary, was diagnosed with ALS. Behind the empire and the flashing cameras, a quieter tragedy was unfolding. In 2011, the Valastro family received devastating news. The family matriarch, Mary Valastro, the heart and soul of Carlo's bakery, had been diagnosed with ALS. It was a cruel twist of fate for a woman who had taken over the bakery after her husband's death and held the family together through every triumph and scandal. Buddy, who had built his entire life around his mother's approval, watched helplessly as the most independent woman he knew was slowly stripped of her abilities. The worst part about ALS is that one day you're able to brush your teeth, then you'll never be able to brush your teeth again. One day you're able to walk, you're never going to walk again, Buddy later reflected. As the disease progressed, Mary became confined to a wheelchair, her motor skills deteriorating over the years. Yet even in her weakest moments, she never stopped being the fierce Italian mother viewers had fallen in love with. She still yells at me. She still calls me. She still drives me a little crazy. She'll never stop being my mom, Buddy said in 2014. Their bond was unbreakable, and the show captured the family's struggle with heartbreaking honesty, adding a layer of emotional depth that resonated with millions of viewers. On June 22, 2017, surrounded by her family, Mary Valastro passed away at the age of 69 from complications of pneumonia, a common end for those fighting ALS. Buddy, absolutely crushed, announced her passing on Instagram with a photo of himself kissing his mother's cheek. Her battle with ALS has ended, she is no longer suffering, and I hope she's dancing to "I Will Survive" with my dad right now. For Buddy, the loss was immense. He hadn't been back to the original Hoboken bakery since her death, knowing that the memories there would be too overwhelming. For a man who had conquered the world, the weight of losing his mother was the heaviest crown of all. If this story surprised you, share it with someone who would enjoy uncovering forgotten Hollywood stories. It was a Sunday in September 2020, a rare day of rest in a schedule that had been relentless for a decade. Buddy Valastro was at his New Jersey home, preparing to watch the New York Giants with his family. In the basement, the family bowling alley, a symbol of the success that had transformed their lives, was malfunctioning. A pin setter had gotten stuck. It was a common fix, something Buddy had done 100 times before. He went behind the machine to clear the jam. What happened next would change everything. For one split second, Buddy turned his head. In that moment, his right hand became wedged between a fork in the mechanism and the moving parts of the pin setter. A blunt metal rod, 1.5 inches thick, pierced through his hand 3 times between his ring and middle fingers. It crushed his thumb as the machine continued its cycle. He was trapped, impaled, and bleeding profusely. He looked down at his hand, the hand that had built an empire, and saw that half of it had been blown out. "I thought I was going to faint," he later recalled. "I thought it was a nightmare." But fate had placed the right people in that basement. His sons, Buddy Jr. and Marco, ages 16 and 13, heard their father scream. They ran to find him pinned to the machine, blood everywhere. Despite their age, they didn't panic. "I didn't want to freak out because I knew if I freaked out I feel like I would have made everybody else a lot worse too," Marco later explained. Buddy Jr. and their uncle, Joey Fogno, a licensed EMT, grabbed a reciprocating saw and pliers, cut through the rod, and freed him within 5 minutes. The image is seared into the family's memory. Sophia, Buddy's daughter, was terrified, unsure if her father would lose a finger or more. His wife, Lisa, screamed for help. But in the chaos, a young teenager remained calm enough to save his father's hand, and perhaps his career. Buddy was rushed to Morristown Memorial Hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery. The doctors were miracle workers, but the battle was only beginning. He would need multiple surgeries, years of rehabilitation, and an uncertain future. The man whose hands were his lifeline now faced the terrifying question: would he ever bake again? Yet against all odds, Buddy Valastro refused to let his story end in that basement. The accident that should have ended his career became the catalyst for an even more remarkable comeback. Within just 12 months, he went from a hand that was destroyed to competing at the highest level, winning Season 3 of Food Network's Buddy vs. Duff with a monstrous Godzilla cake. He told Daily Mail TV he was 95% recovered, with about 90% of his strength back and all his movement and dexterity restored. But the road was far from smooth. By October 2025, nearly 6 years after the accident, Buddy was preparing for his 5th and final hand surgery. The tendon on his hand had healed on the opposite side of the knuckle, causing his fingers to lean right, a condition he jokingly compared to Star Trek's Spock. Even after all those surgeries, he still couldn't lift his middle finger on its own. "I can't do it still. But that's what happens when you stick your hand in a bowling machine where it doesn't belong," he quipped. "I learned the hard way." If you enjoyed this documentary, like the video and subscribe for more true celebrity stories every week. The miraculous part? He was back to work the day after surgery, decorating his 24th wedding anniversary cake with his freshly bandaged hand while his daughter Sophia filmed. "I wanted Mom to know that even though I had hand surgery on our anniversary, I still did something for her," he said. The empire continued to expand. Today, Buddy oversees a growing portfolio that includes Carlo's bakery locations nationwide, restaurants like Buddy V's Ristorante, and even cake vending machines. In 2024, a flagship location opened in the heart of Times Square. And in 2026, he opened a new Carlo's bakery and Buddy V's restaurant in a Texas mall. Cake Boss may have ended its run in 2020 without fanfare, quietly fading as ratings declined and competition intensified. But Buddy's story didn't end with the show. The man who built an empire with his hands, nearly lost them, and fought his way back all while carrying the weight of his father's legacy and his mother's memory, remains the boss of cake. And in a 2023 interview, reflecting on everything he'd been through, he said something that perfectly captured the entire journey. It was one of those things where it shows you how important family is. We take for granted the little things like opening the door or just doing something with your hand. It makes you appreciate the little things so much. That, perhaps, is the most important lesson from the rise and fall, and rise again, of the cake boss. Because in the end, the empire was never about the cakes at all.